17 nannies failed to get the triplets to sleep, but the black maid does the impossible. Jessica Thompson was at her breaking point when Keisha Johnson arrived at the mansion in Beverly Hills, Los Angeles. 3 weeks without a single night of sleep had turned the 32-year-old woman into a shadow of herself. While the endless cries of the triplets, Ethan, Noah, and Mason, echoed through the halls of the house. Keisha took in the chaotic scene unfolding in the entryway. The mistress was crying along with the 6-month-old babies, while the housekeeper Margaret barked orders at the other staff. 17 specialized nannies had already come and gone, all failing miserably to calm the little ones who hadn't slept since birth. "You must be Keisha," said Margaret, the 50-year-old housekeeper, looking the 45-year-old black woman up and down as she stood there in her simple uniform. "I hope you understand your role clearly. You're here to clean, nothing more." Keisha nodded silently, but her experienced eyes had already caught something all the other professionals had missed. The 3 boys were crying in different rhythms, but there were moments when their voices harmonized, as if they were trying to communicate. Jessica lifted her red, tear-streaked eyes and looked at Keisha with a mix of desperation and skepticism. "Have you cared for babies before?" she asked hoarsely. "Ma'am, she's here for cleaning." Margaret cut in before Keisha could answer. "You've suffered enough false hopes already. Let the specialists handle the children." Keisha held back her reply, but something in her chest tightened at the sight of those 3 little beings in such distress. There was something familiar in those cries, something that stirred memories she had buried deep. The Thompson home was a 3-story mansion with immaculate gardens and furniture worth more than Keisha's annual salary. But all that wealth couldn't buy what mattered most right now: peace for the triplets. Dr. Richard, the family pediatrician, was examining the babies again when Keisha began her work. "It's incomprehensible," he murmured to Jessica. "All the tests are normal. There's no medical explanation for this behavior." Keisha quietly cleaned the hallway near the children's room, but her trained ears caught every word. She knew those symptoms, knew that desperation. Her own daughter. "Keisha!" Margaret shouted. "What are you doing standing there? Go clean the kitchen!" That first night, Keisha barely slept in the small back room of the house. The triplets' cries pierced through the mansion's thick walls, and each scream felt like a stab to her heart. Around 3 in the morning, the sudden silence frightened her more than the crying. Keisha left her room and walked through the dark halls until she reached the children's room. The door was slightly ajar, and she could see Jessica passed out in the nursing chair, the 3 babies crying alone in their cribs. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Without a second thought, Keisha entered the room. She picked up Ethan and began humming an old song her grandmother had taught her, a sweet melody about 3 little birds who could only fly together. To her surprise, Ethan stopped crying for a few seconds. The other 2 quieted too, as if listening. "What are you doing in here?" Margaret's furious voice shattered the silence. The housekeeper stood in the doorway, her face red with anger. "I made your role perfectly clear." Jessica startled awake. She was just... She tried to explain, still dazed. "You can't allow this," Margaret snapped. Insisted Margaret. "She could hurt the children. She has no qualifications." But Jessica had noticed something. For the first time in weeks, one of the triplets had stopped crying, even if just for a few seconds. "Let her continue," said Jessica, in a tone that brooked no argument. Keisha began humming again, and this time she picked up Noah too. The reaction was immediate. Both babies calmed down, and Mason, still in the crib, reduced his crying to a soft whimper. "This is ridiculous," protested Margaret. "I'm calling Dr. Richard right now." "No," said Jessica, rising from the armchair. "For the first time in 3 weeks, my children are quiet. I won't interrupt this." Keisha looked at her employer and saw the same desperation she herself had felt years ago. She decided to take a chance. "Mrs. Thompson, may I say something?" Jessica nodded, still stunned by the scene before her. "They need to be together," Keisha said softly, still gently rocking the 2 babies. "All those months in your womb they were connected. Now they feel lost when they're apart. Margaret huffed indignantly. What nonsense! Professional nannies always separate twins to make care easier. That's basic technique. But Jessica was paying attention. Keisha placed Ethan and Noah in the same crib side by side and picked up Mason. The three babies looked at each other and, as if by magic, completely stopped crying. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in weeks, the Thompson household knew peace. "How did you know this?" asked Jessica, tears in her eyes. Keisha hesitated. Painful memories rushed back like an avalanche. I've cared for many children in my life, Mom." The next morning, Michael Thompson, Jessica's husband, returned from yet another business trip. Tall, broad-shouldered, and always dressed in expensive suits, he had a habit of solving everything with money and authority. "What do you mean the maid is taking care of my children?" he shouted over the phone to Jessica, who was in the nursery. "Have you lost your mind?" "Michael, for the first time they slept through the night," explained Jessica, exhausted but hopeful. "This is unacceptable. A housekeeper isn't qualified to care for children. What if she does something wrong? What if she hurts them?" Keisha, who was cleaning the nearby hallway, heard the entire argument. Her heart clenched. She knew that tone, that prejudice disguised as concern. Michael arrived home late that afternoon, accompanied by yet another specialist, Dr. Patricia, a renowned pediatrician he had hired at great expense. "Where are the children?" he asked, completely ignoring Keisha. "In the nursery, sleeping," replied Jessica. "Sleeping? At this hour?" They went up to the triplets' room. The three babies were sleeping peacefully in the same crib, nestled together as they had been in the womb. Dr. Patricia examined the scene with disapproval. "This is completely wrong. Babies need individual space to develop independence. Who suggested this?" Margaret, who had followed the group, pointed at Keisha. "It was the maid, doctor. I said it was wrong, but Mrs. Thompson wouldn't listen." Michael glared at Keisha with a mix of anger and disdain. "You," he said, jabbing a finger at her, "who do you think you are, giving advice about my children?" Keisha kept her head down, but Jessica stepped forward. "Michael, they slept 12 hours straight. 12 hours. Since they were born, they've never gone more than an hour without crying." "That's coincidence," said Dr. Patricia. "Babies go through phases. We'll separate them now and establish a proper routine." She moved toward the crib to pick up one of the babies, but the moment she touched Ethan, all three woke up and began crying simultaneously, with such intensity that everyone in the room recoiled. "See," cried Keisha, raising her voice for the first time. "They need to be together." The silence that followed was heavy. Michael looked at Keisha with surprise. No maid had ever spoken to him that way. "How dare you?" he began to say, but Jessica interrupted him. "She's right," Jessica said, picking up Ethan in her arms. When they're together, they calm down. Dr. Patricia tried several techniques to soothe the babies separately, but nothing worked. Only when Keisha put them back together, humming her song, did they stop crying. "This is unusual," admitted the doctor, clearly bothered by being contradicted by a maid. That evening, Michael called a family meeting. His mother, Mrs. Barbara, a 70-year-old woman with very firm opinions about everyone's place, came specifically to give her thoughts. "Jessica, my dear," Mrs. Barbara said, holding her daughter-in-law's hands, "you're letting desperation cloud your judgment. A maid can't know more than specialized doctors." "But it worked, mother-in-law. For the first time, it worked." "And you think this will last?" Michael interjected. "What if she blackmails us? What if she asks for a raise? You're giving her too much power." Keisha, who was serving coffee in the room, felt each word like a slap in the face. She knew that kind of talk, those insinuations. Ashley, Jessica's 15-year-old daughter from a previous relationship, entered the room. "Mum, the babies are crying again," she said. Everyone rushed to the bedroom. The triplets had been separated again by Margaret, and they were crying desperately. "Keisha!" Jessica shouted. "Please!" Keisha entered the room, and under the suspicious gaze of the entire family, placed the three babies together again. Within seconds, the crying stopped. Mrs. Barbara watched the scene with an unreadable expression. "This isn't natural," she murmured. Dr. Richard, who had been called to the meeting, observed everything with scientific interest. "Actually," he said slowly, "there are documented cases of twins maintaining connections after birth. Maybe this is it." "Nonsense," said Dr. Patricia. "Those are just old wives' tales without scientific basis." But the evidence was right there, in front of everyone. 3 babies who only calmed down when they were together, and a maid who had figured it out when 17 specialists had failed. "I want to know how she knew this," Michael said, staring directly at Keisha. "What's your background?" Keisha took a deep breath. It was time to share part of the truth. "Mr. Michael, I raised 9 siblings when my mother got sick. I learned to care for children out of necessity." "9 siblings?" Jessica asked, surprised. "Yes, ma'am. From babies to teenagers. My mother was bedridden when I was just 16. I had to learn fast." Mrs. Barbara rolled her eyes. "Experience isn't qualification, dear." But something in Keisha's story touched Jessica deeply. She imagined a 16-year-old girl taking care of 9 siblings alone. The tension in the house grew in the following days. Margaret, feeling her authority threatened, began subtly sabotaging Keisha's work. When Keisha left the triplets sleeping together, Margaret would separate them as soon as she walked away. "The babies are crying again," Margaret would shout, making it seem like Keisha's technique didn't work. Michael used these moments as proof that Keisha was incompetent. "You see," he'd say to Jessica, "she doesn't fix anything, it's all in your head." But Jessica had started noticing the pattern. Whenever the babies cried inexplicably, they were apart. When they were together, they slept peacefully. One morning, Jessica caught Margaret purposely waking Ethan so he would start crying, and then wake the other 2. "Margaret, what are you doing?" The housekeeper flinched. I was just checking if he was breathing well, ma'am." But Jessica wasn't foolish. She understood what was happening. That afternoon, while Keisha was cleaning the library, Jessica approached her. "Keisha, can I ask you a personal question?" Keisha stopped cleaning and looked at her employer attentively. "Of course, Mrs. Thompson." "Do you have children?" The question hit Keisha like a punch to the gut. Her hands trembled imperceptibly. I had a daughter, ma'am." "Had?" Keisha closed her eyes. The memories she had tried to lock away began to spill out. She passed when she was 2, ma'am." Jessica felt her heart tighten. "How?" "She had a condition similar to your boy's, ma'am. She cried day and night, couldn't sleep. I was very young, didn't know what to do. The doctors at the clinic said it was normal, that it would pass." Tears began to stream down Keisha's face. She stopped breathing one night. I was asleep, exhausted from trying to soothe her. When I woke up..." Jessica stepped closer, and for the first time since Keisha had arrived at the house, touched her arm. "Keisha, I'm so sorry. That's why I know what your sons feel, ma'am. It's like they're lost, searching for something they can't find. My destiny was like that." The name of her lost daughter echoed in the silent library like a prayer. "That's why you can calm them," Jessica said, finally understanding. "I see my daughter in them, ma'am, and I can't let the same thing happen." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. That night, Jessica talked to Michael about Keisha's story. "You don't understand," she said. "She lost a daughter, she knows this pain." "And that qualifies her as a nanny?" Michael retorted. "Jessica, you're letting your emotions take over. We need qualified professionals." 17 qualified professionals failed, Michael. Then we'll find the 18th, the 19th, however many it takes. The argument was interrupted by the triplets crying. Instinctively, they both rushed to the children's room. Keisha was already there, placing the 3 babies together and humming her song. Within minutes, they were asleep again. Michael watched silently. There was something in the way Keisha cared for the babies, a genuine tenderness he hadn't seen in the other nannies. "Keisha," he called, using her name for the first time. "Do you really think they need to stay together?" "Mr. Thompson, they spent 9 months together inside your wife. They know each other. They feel safe with one another. When they're apart, it's like they're lost." Michael looked at his 3 sons, sleeping peacefully. "And you think this is permanent?" "No, sir. In time, they'll grow and develop their own personalities. But right now, they're still so small they need this connection." For the first time, Michael began to consider that maybe Keisha was right. The next day, an unexpected visitor arrived. Brittany, one of the specialized nannies who had been fired, returned with a lawyer. "I heard you're letting a housekeeper care for newborns," she said with an air of superiority. "This is parental negligence. I'm here to document the situation." The lawyer took photos of the house and made notes. "Where are the children?" Brittany asked. "Sleeping," Jessica replied tensely. "At this time of day? That's not healthy. Babies need routine." They went up to the triplets' room. The 3 were sleeping peacefully in the same crib. "Look!" Brittany exclaimed. "This is completely inappropriate. Babies should never sleep together. It's dangerous." The lawyer scribbled more notes. "Mrs. Thompson, this could be considered negligence. You could lose custody of your children." Jessica paled. Michael came running, alerted by Margaret. "What's going on here?" Brittany explained the situation, painting Keisha as dangerous and incompetent. "She's using primitive and unsafe methods with your children," she said. "I have a professional obligation to report this." Keisha, who had overheard the conversation from the hallway, entered the room. "Excuse me," she said with a dignity that surprised everyone. "May I explain the situation?" "You're not qualified to explain anything," Brittany said scornfully. But Keisha continued. "Miss Brittany, you were here for 2 weeks. Not once did the babies stop crying when they were with you. In 2 days with me, they started sleeping through the night. That's just a coincidence." "Then let's do a test," Keisha proposed. "You try to calm them your way and I'll try mine. We'll see which one works." Brittany accepted the challenge, confident in her credentials. Keisha gently woke one of the triplets, who immediately started crying and woke the other 2. Brittany tried all her techniques, rocking each one separately, using different sounds, changing diapers, offering bottles. Nothing worked. The babies cried for over an hour. Then it was Keisha's turn. She simply placed all 3 babies together in the same crib, began humming her song, and in less than 5 minutes, they were asleep. The silence in the room was deafening. This isn't possible," Brittany murmured. The lawyer quietly put away his notes. "How do you do that?" Brittany asked, for the first time without arrogance in her voice. Keisha looked at her with compassion. "Miss Brittany, it's not technique. It's love. It's understanding that sometimes children know what they need better than adults." Brittany and the lawyer left without another word. But the situation was far from resolved. The next day, Mrs. Barbara arrived with reinforcements, the entire extended Thompson family. "This has to stop," she declared in the room crowded with aunts, cousins, and in-laws. "We won't allow our heirs to be raised by simple people's methods." The loaded remark didn't go unnoticed. Aunt Linda, Michael's sister, was more direct. "Jessica, dear, you need to understand your place. These people only know what they've learned from a hard life. That doesn't apply to children from a family like ours." Keisha, who was serving coffee to the guests, felt each word like a lash. Cousin Christopher, the family doctor, joined in. "From a medical standpoint, it's irresponsible to let someone without academic training make decisions about newborns' health." Jessica tried to defend Keisha, but was being attacked from all sides. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "She achieved what no one else could." "Temporarily," Mrs. Barbara said. "And at what cost? You're putting those babies at risk." That's when Ashley walked into the room. "Can I say something?" Everyone turned to the teenager. "I live in this house. I hear everything. Do you know how many weeks I couldn't sleep because of the babies crying? Do you know what it was like watching my mother waste away from exhaustion?" She looked around the room. "Since Keisha arrived, this house has had peace for the first time. And you want to end that? Why? Because she's a maid? Because she's black?" The silence that followed was devastating. "Ashley," Michael scolded. "No, Dad. Someone has to speak the truth. You're all too afraid to admit that a maid knew how to care for the babies better than expensive doctors." Mrs. Barbara stood up, outraged. "Such disrespect. Michael, you need to control this girl." but Ashley wasn't finished. "And you know what else? I talked to Keisha. Do you know what her qualifications are? The ones you all look down on?" Everyone paid attention. "She's a licensed nurse. She worked 10 years in a neonatal ICU, but lost her job when she got pregnant and couldn't find work in the field again. The revelation hit the room like a bombshell." "Is this true?" asked Jessica, looking at Keisha. Keisha nodded, embarrassed. "Why didn't you say something before?" asked Michael. "Because you knew they wouldn't hire me if they found out, sir. Black woman, single mother, older age. No one hires someone like me for specialized work." The room fell silent. The truth was raw and undeniable. Cousin Christopher cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, this changes things a bit." "Changes," said Mrs. Barbara. "If she was qualified, why was she working as a maid?" "Because the world isn't easy for people like me, Mum," Keisha replied with dignity. "When my daughter was born, I was fired from the hospital. They said single mothers couldn't focus on work. After she passed, I tried to return, but they said I was emotionally unstable. I ended up taking cleaning jobs because it was all I could get." Jessica felt tears streaming down her face. "Keisha, why didn't you tell me this?" "Because experience taught me people prefer to judge first and get to know you later, Mom." Aunt Linda looked visibly uncomfortable. "Well, even so, it's not proper to mix staff." "This isn't about mixing anything," Jessica interrupted, standing up. "It's about my children being well, and they are well with Keisha." Michael looked at his wife, then at Keisha, then at the family in the room. "I think," he began slowly, "maybe we should give Keisha a chance to show what she's capable of." Mrs. Barbara stomped her foot. "Michael, you can't be serious." "Mom, you saw the results. The boys are sleeping, they're calm. Jessica is resting for the first time in months. What difference does it make if the person who did this is a maid or a doctor?" Keisha felt her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time in years, someone was defending not just her competence, but her right to be respected. The family left, some clearly displeased, others thoughtful. Mrs. Barbara was the last to go. "Keisha," she called before leaving. "Yes, ma'am." "I lost a grandson 15 years ago. He cried just like those boys. The doctors couldn't help and he passed." Keisha looked at the older woman with understanding. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. If you can save these babies, if you can give them what my grandson didn't get, I'll accept anything." That night, Michael found Keisha in the garden, watering the plants. "Keisha, can I talk to you?" "Of course, Mr. Michael." "I owe you an apology. I judged you without knowing you." Keisha stopped watering and looked at him. "You were protecting your family. I understand." "No, you don't. I was being prejudiced, and that's inexcusable." They stood in silence for a moment. "Keisha, I want to make you an offer. How about you're officially hired as the Triplets caregiver, with fair pay and proper recognition?" Keisha's legs trembled. "Mr. Michael, are you sure?" "Absolutely. You saved my children and my wife. It's the right thing to do." But Keisha knew it wouldn't be that simple. The next morning, Margaret quit. "I won't work in a house where a maid becomes a specialized nanny," she said, packing her things. "This goes against everything I believe about hierarchy." Jessica didn't try to stop her. In fact, she felt relief. Without Margaret constantly sabotaging, they could finally establish a healthy routine for the triplets. With Keisha officially in charge of the babies, the transformation in the house was remarkable. The triplets not only slept through the night, but began developing astonishingly. "They're smiling," exclaimed Jessica one morning, watching the 3 babies interacting with each other in their shared crib. Dr. Richard, who had become a regular visitor to monitor the case, was fascinated. "It's extraordinary," he said, taking notes. "They're developing at an accelerated pace. The bond between them seems to be strengthening each one's neurological development." Keisha smiled, observing Ethan trying to grab Noah's foot while Mason drooled on his own fist. "They're teaching each other," she said. "See how Ethan imitates the sounds Noah makes? And how Mason laughs when the other 2 laugh? Have you ever thought about writing about this?" asked Dr. Richard. "Your technique could help other families." Keisha had never considered that possibility. 3 months later, the transformation was complete. The triplets were happy, healthy babies, each developing their own personalities while maintaining the special connection Keisha had identified. Ethan was the most observant, always paying attention to his surroundings. Noah was the most communicative, constantly babbling as if trying to tell stories. Mason was the most physical, always moving his arms and legs as if dancing. "They're ready to sleep in separate cribs," Keisha told Jessica one afternoon, "but still in the same room. The connection will remain, but now they also need to develop individuality." The transition was smooth. The triplets accepted their separate cribs easily, but still calmed down when they could see each other. One morning, as Keisha fed Mason his bottle, Jessica sat beside her. "Keisha, can I make a confession?" "Of course, Mrs. Thompson." "When you first arrived here, I was thinking about giving up. I couldn't take it anymore. I was considering placing the boys in care and checking myself in somewhere too." Keisha stopped feeding Mason and looked at Jessica. "Ma'am, you didn't just save my children, Keisha. You saved me too." Tears streamed down both women's faces. "You would have found a solution," Keisha said. "Mothers always find a way." "No, Keisha. I had lost all hope completely. You gave me back my children and gave me back myself." At that moment, Ethan began crying in his crib. Instinctively, Keisha stood to pick him up, but Jessica stopped her. "Let me try," she said. Jessica lifted Ethan into her arms and began humming the same song Keisha always sang. To her delight, the baby calmed down immediately. "I learned from the best teacher," Jessica said, smiling through her tears. 6 months later, the story of the Thompson triplets had quietly spread among pediatricians and families facing similar challenges. Dr. Richard had written an academic paper about the case, always crediting Keisha as the discoverer of the technique. "Keisha," he said during one of his visits, "I got a call from a family in Washington. They have twins with a similar issue. Would you like to help?" Keisha looked at Jessica, uncertain. "Go," Jessica said. "You can save other families like you saved ours. I can take care of the boys for a few days. But what if they start crying again without me? Keisha, you taught me everything I need to know. And besides, they're not the same desperate babies I first met. They're happy, secure children now." Keisha traveled to Washington and within a week helped the family with their struggling twins. The technique worked again. When she returned to Los Angeles, she was met with a surprise. Jessica had turned one of the house's rooms into an office for Keisha. "What's this?" "Your consulting space," Jessica said, smiling. "You're going to start advising families with multiples. Dr. Richard already has a list of interested parents." "Mrs. Thompson, I can't." "Yes, you can. You have a gift, Keisha, and knowledge that can help so many families. We can't keep this just for ourselves." Michael Thompson appeared at the office door. "Keisha, we also have a partnership proposal. How about opening a specialized center for multiple birth care? You'd be the medical director." Keisha sat in one of the chairs trying to process what she was hearing. You want to be my partners?" "We want to be your family," said Jessica, "because that's what you are to us now." Ashley rushed into the office. "Keisha!" The boys took their first steps, all three at the same time. Everyone ran to the living room, where the triplets, now 1 year and 3 months old, were trying to walk toward each other, as if still drawn by that invisible connection Keisha had noticed from day one. Ethan took 3 wobbly steps toward Noah. Noah laughed and tried to meet his brother, but plopped down. Mason, not wanting to be left out, stood up and took 2 steps before sitting down too. All 3 laughed loudly, as if knowing they'd accomplished something important together. "See," said Keisha, tears in her eyes. "They still do everything together, but now by choice, not because they need to." That night, while putting the triplets to sleep, each in their own crib but still sharing the same room, Keisha reflected on the incredible journey her life had taken. She'd arrived at that house as an unemployed housekeeper, carrying the pain of losing her own daughter. Now she was about to open a specialized center, helping families across the country. "Good night, Ethan," she said, tucking in the first triplet. "Good night, Noah," she continued, moving to the second crib. "Good night, Mason," she finished, stroking the third one's head. All three babies looked up at her with their bright blue eyes, as if understanding she was the person who'd changed their lives forever. "Thank you, Destiny," Keisha whispered, looking up at the ceiling, "for leading me to them, for giving me a second chance to be a mother." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers so much. Now, continuing. 1 year later, the Thompson-Johnson Center for Specialized Multiple Birth Care was in full swing. Keisha had become a national authority on caring for twins, triplets, and quadruplets with adjustment difficulties. The Keisha method, as it came to be known, had already helped over 100 families across the United States. The technique was simple: respect the natural connection between multiples, allow them to stay together in their first months, and gradually encourage individuality without breaking the special bond they shared. "Dr. Keisha," the receptionist called. "A family from Colorado just arrived, quadruplets who haven't stopped crying for 2 months." Keisha smiled. She still wasn't fully used to the doctor title, but she understood it represented the respect she'd finally earned. "Send them in," she said, adjusting the white coat she now wore with pride. The family that entered looked visibly exhausted. The young parents carried 4 babies crying in unison. "Dr. Keisha," the mother said tearfully, "we read about your work online. Our pediatrician said there was nothing else to be done." Keisha looked at the 4 babies and immediately recognized the signs she'd learned to identify with the Thompson triplets. "Let's see what we can do," she said, with the confidence of someone who'd already transformed many lives. 2 hours later, all 4 babies slept peacefully in the specially designed crib Keisha had developed for multiples. The parents cried with relief. "How do you do it?" the father asked in disbelief. "By listening to what the babies are trying to tell us," Keisha replied. "They know what they need. That's us who sometimes don't know how to listen." That afternoon, Keisha returned home because the Thompson mansion had truly become her home. She had her own apartment on the ground floor, but she ate every meal with the family and participated in all the important decisions. The triplets, now 2.5 years old, ran to greet her when she arrived. "Aunt Keisha! Aunt Keisha!" the 3 of them shouted, hugging her legs. Yes, she had become Aunt Keisha to them. She wasn't their biological mother, but she was definitely part of the family. "How was preschool today?" she asked, crouching down to their level. "Ethan taught Noah how to tie his shoes," said Mason, always the group's spokesperson. "And Noah taught Mason to count to 10, Ethan added. "And Mason taught me how to make a funny face," laughed Noah. Keisha smiled. They were still learning from each other, but now each had their own skills and interests. Jessica appeared in the doorway. "How was your day at the center?" "Another family saved," said Keisha. "Quadruplets from Colorado." "You're amazing," said Jessica, hugging Keisha. "I still remember the day you arrived here. It feels like a lifetime ago." "It's only been 3 years," said Keisha. "No, it's been several lives. The life I had before, full of despair. The life that began when you taught us to listen to our children, and the life we have now, full of purpose and gratitude." That evening, during family dinner, Michael made an announcement. "Keisha, we received an interesting proposal today." "What kind of proposal?" "The University of California wants you to develop a specialization program in multiple birth care. You'd be the coordinator." Keisha nearly choked on her food. "Me? Lead a university program?" "Why not?" said Ashley, now 18 and about to start medical school. "You've already taught hundreds of people. The difference is now it'd be official." "But Keisha," Jessica interrupted, "you saved our family. You've saved over 100 families. You developed a revolutionary technique. It's time to share it with the world on a larger scale." Keisha looked around the table. The family that had once welcomed her as a housekeeper now treated her as an equal, as an integral part of their lives. "I accept," she said, surprising herself with the quick decision. Everyone applauded, including the triplets, who clapped whenever the adults did, even if they didn't understand why. 6 months later, Keisha was at the University of California, teaching her first class to a room of pediatricians, nurses, and early childhood psychologists. The first and most important principle, she told the packed room, is understanding that multiples aren't just siblings born on the same day. They shared a unique space during the most crucial months of development. That connection doesn't magically disappear at birth. One of the students raised her hand. Professor Keisha, doesn't that contradict everything we've learned about individual development? It doesn't contradict, Keisha replied patiently. It complements. First, we let them feel secure by maintaining the connection they know. Then, gradually, we encourage individual growth. It's like learning to walk. First, you hold on to something steady, then you let go and walk on your own. After class, a young nursing student approached Keisha. Professor, may I ask a personal question? Of course. How did you discover your technique? Keisha smiled, remembering her first night in the Thompson house. By losing my own daughter and promising I'd never let it happen again if I could prevent it. The student was silent for a moment. My sister is pregnant with twins. She's very worried after reading about babies who cry non-stop. Tell her not to worry, said Keisha. If she needs help, we now know how to help. That evening, Keisha returned home and found a scene that filled her with joy. The triplets were in the living room, each playing with different toys but sitting in a triangle, always maintaining eye contact with one another. Ethan was putting together a puzzle, Noah was flipping through a picture book, and Mason was stacking colorful blocks. But every now and then, one would show their discovery to the others, sharing the joy of their achievement. See, said Jessica, who was watching the scene beside Keisha. They're independent, but they never forget they're three. That's exactly how it should be, said Keisha. Michael came home from work and went straight to hug his three children. How was my Champions Day? Daddy! The three shouted in unison. Aunt Keisha is here. Michael smiled at Keisha. How was it at the university? Amazing. Every new class I train means more families can be helped. And the research? How's it going? Keisha had started a longitudinal study, tracking the development of multiples treated with her technique versus those treated with traditional methods. The preliminary results are encouraging. The children treated with our technique show greater emotional stability and better social development. That means you were right from the start, said Jessica. It means sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective, Keisha corrected, and that we should always listen to what children are trying to tell us. 2 years later, Keisha was giving an international lecture in Buenos Aires about her method. The audience was filled with professionals from all over Latin America. The Keisha method, she said on stage, isn't just about making babies stop crying. It's about respecting individuality within connection. It's about understanding that some children need different approaches. After the lecture, an Argentine doctor approached her. Doctor, Keisha, I'd like to implement your method in our hospital. Do you have any training programs? Yes, Keisha replied. We have partnerships with universities across the United States. I can connect you with our international program. That night, in her hotel room, Keisha video called Jessica. How are my boys? The screen showed the triplets, now 5 years old, each with their own well-defined personalities. Ethan had become the little scientist, always asking questions and figuring out how things worked. Noah was the storyteller, inventing fantastic adventures that entertained the whole family. Mason was the artist, always drawing, singing, or dancing. Aunt Keisha, when are you coming back? Asked Noah. Tomorrow, sweetheart, and I have news about our center. What news? The three asked in unison. We're opening a branch in Buenos Aires. More children will be able to get help. The three boys cheered excitedly, even if they didn't fully understand what it meant. After ending the call, Keisha stood on the hotel balcony, looking out at the illuminated city. 5 years ago, she was an unemployed housekeeper, carrying the pain of losing her daughter. Today, she was an international expert in specialized care, helping families in multiple countries. But what made her happiest wasn't the titles or recognition. It was knowing that Destiny, her lost daughter, had found purpose in her story. Every baby Keisha soothed was a way to honor the memory of the girl she couldn't save. The next day, on her flight back to Los Angeles, Keisha reviewed her lecture notes. She had received invitations to speak at conferences in Colombia, Chile, and Mexico. The Keisha method was spreading throughout Latin America. When she got home, she found a surprise. The living room was decorated with balloons and banners. "Surprise!" everyone shouted as she walked in. "What is this?" "We're celebrating 5 years of our complete family," said Jessica, approaching with a cake. "5 years since you arrived and changed our lives," Michael added. The triplets ran to hug her, each carrying a drawing they had made for her. Ethan drew a woman in a white coat surrounded by smiling babies. Noah drew a big family with lots of colors, where everyone was holding hands. Mason drew a giant heart with several people inside. "Thank you, my loves," said Keisha, tears in her eyes. "Keisha," said Ashley, now in her 3rd year of medical school, "I have a confession to make." "What is it?" "You inspired me to choose pediatrics as my specialty. I want to work with you at the center when I graduate." Keisha felt her heart overflow with emotion. "It would be an honor to have you as my partner." That night, after the children went to bed, Keisha, Jessica, and Michael stayed on the porch talking. "Keisha," said Jessica, "sometimes I wonder what our lives would be like if you hadn't come to us." "You would have found a solution," said Keisha. "Families who love each other always find a way." "Maybe," said Michael, "but it wouldn't be this way. It wouldn't be this incredible path we've taken together." They fell silent for a moment, listening to the sounds of the Los Angeles night. "You know what I find most amazing about this whole story?" said Keisha. "What?" "That it all started with the cries of 3 babies. And today, those cries have turned into laughter, discoveries, and shared love." "And into a life's mission," Jessica added. "Exactly. Sometimes our greatest pains lead us to our greatest purposes." The following month, Keisha received a call that would change her life once again. "Dr. Keisha, this is the Department of Health. We'd like to invite you to coordinate a national program for specialized multiple birth care." Keisha nearly dropped the phone. "A national program?" "Yes. Based on your results, we want to implement the Keisha method in all public hospitals across the country. You would be the general coordinator." Keisha looked out the clinic window, seeing families coming and going with their babies, all transformed by the experience of finally being able to soothe their children. "I accept," she said without hesitation. 6 months later, Keisha was in Washington for the launch ceremony of the National Program for Specialized Multiple Birth Care. The ceremony took place at the White House, with the Secretary of Health and several officials in attendance. "It is with great pleasure," the Secretary said at the microphone, "that we announce this pioneering program developed by Dr. Keisha Johnson, which has transformed the lives of hundreds of American families." Keisha stood on stage, wearing a navy blue suit Jessica had insisted she buy. In the audience, she could see the entire Thompson family: Jessica, Michael, Ashley, and the triplets, now 6 years old, sitting in the front row. When it was her turn to speak, Keisha stepped up to the microphone. "7 years ago," she began, "I was an unemployed housekeeper who had lost her only daughter. Today, I stand here representing a program that will help thousands of families across the country." She paused and looked at the Thompson family. "But none of this would have been possible without a family who gave me a chance when no one else would, a family who taught me that love knows no social, racial, or economic barriers." Applause echoed through the hall. "This program isn't just mine. It belongs to all of us who believe that every child deserves to be understood, every family deserves help, and every person deserves a second chance to find their purpose in life." After the ceremony, Keisha was surrounded by journalists, politicians, and healthcare professionals, but her eyes were searching for only one thing: the 3 boys who had changed her life. She found them in the palace garden, playing Ring Around the Rosie with other children who had attended the ceremony. "Ethan, Noah, Mason," she called. The 3 ran to her. "Aunt Keisha, you looked so pretty up there on stage," said Noah. "And so important," added Mason. "You're going to help lots of babies now, right?" asked Ethan, always the most serious of the 3. "I will," she said, hugging them all. "And do you know why?" "Why?" Because you taught me that sometimes the best solutions are the simplest. And that love always finds a way. That night, on the plane back to Los Angeles, Keisha looked out the window at the city lights below. In each of those lights, she knew there were families, crying babies, desperate parents. But now, for the first time in the nation's history, there would be a network of professionals trained in the Keisha method to help them. The cries of 3 babies in a Beverly Hills mansion had sparked a nationwide revolution in childcare. 3 months later, the first results of the national program began pouring in. Hospitals across the country reported dramatic reductions in hospital stays for multiples, decreased use of medication for fussy babies, and a significant rise in family satisfaction. Keisha was in her office at the Thompson Johnson Center when she received a special call. "Dr. Keisha, this is Mary from Portland. My daughter had triplets 2 months ago and they wouldn't stop crying. The hospital used your method and now they sleep through the night. I just called to say thank you." Calls like this came every day. Keisha had created a bulletin board in her office where she pinned photos sent by families, multiples sleeping peacefully, smiling parents, handwritten thank you notes. "Aunt Keisha," Ethan burst into the office, followed by his brothers. "Mom said you have a surprise for us." Keisha smiled. It was true. Jessica had called earlier with news she knew would thrill the boys. "Sit right here," she said, pointing to the colorful little chairs she'd bought especially for their visits. "You know Aunt Keisha helps babies, right?" "Yeah," they chorused. "And you know it all started when you were babies and cried so much?" "Uh-huh," said Noah. "And you made us stop crying." "Exactly. Well, now there's a very special family who needs our help." "What family?" asked Mason, always curious. "A family who's having triplets, just like you were. And the mom is really scared they'll cry like you did." Ethan, ever the thoughtful one, understood first. "And you're gonna help them?" "I am, but this time I'd like you to help me too." "Us?" all 3 asked, surprised. "You can talk to the babies. Tell them how great it is to be triplets. Sing the songs I sang to you." The idea of being part of Aunt Keisha's mission made them giddy. "When?" they asked eagerly. "Tomorrow. The family is coming here to the center." The next day, Keisha welcomed Crystal and Kyle, a young couple from Denver expecting triplets. Crystal, 8 months pregnant, had grown terrified after reading about multiples who cried non-stop. "Dr. Keisha," Crystal said, hands on her swollen belly, "I'm so scared. I read about families who don't sleep for months." "You don't need to worry," Keisha assured her. "We'll prepare you to welcome your babies the best way possible." Just then, Ethan, Noah, and Mason walked into the office, followed by Jessica. "These are my special consultants," Keisha said with a smile. "Ethan, Noah, and Mason, who were once triplets, just like your babies will be." The 3 boys approached Crystal. "Can I talk to the babies?" asked Noah, always the most talkative. Crystal smiled and nodded. Noah placed his hand on her belly and began to speak. "Hi, babies. You'll be born soon, and you're going to be so happy. Aunt Keisha will take care of you, and you'll stay close together just like we did." Ethan stepped closer too. "Don't be afraid of anything. It's normal to feel confused at first, but soon you'll understand everything." Mason started humming the same song Keisha had sung to them years ago. Crystal began to cry with emotion. They moved when the boys started talking," she said, surprised. "Babies recognize the voices of those who've been through the same experience," Keisha explained. "You're seeing living proof that triplets can grow up happy and well-adjusted." Kyle, who had stayed quiet, walked up to Ethan. "What was it like when you were babies?" "We cried a lot," Ethan admitted honestly, "but it was because we were confused. When Aunt Keisha taught us how to stay close, everything got better." "And now are you happy?" "So happy," the 3 answered in unison. "Do you ever fight?" "Sometimes," said Noah. "But we always make up because we're special brothers." Keisha guided the couple through everything they needed to know: how to prepare the nursery, what techniques to use in the first days, how to recognize the signs that the babies needed to be together. "Remember," she said at the end of the appointment, "you're not alone. We have a network of trained professionals across the country, and besides that, you have 3 special consultants who are always available to talk to the babies. 2 weeks later, Keisha got a call from Denver. Dr. Keisha, they're here, 3 beautiful girls, and they're so calm. That's wonderful. How are you feeling? Confident, prepared. We know what to do if they start crying too much. Did you need to use the techniques? Just once on the first night. They started crying together, so we put them in the same crib, sang the little song the boys taught us, and they calmed right down. Keisha hung up the phone with a heart full of gratitude. Another family had been spared the suffering she and the Thompsons had endured. That afternoon, while organizing clinic files, she came across a folder she hadn't opened in years. Inside was the birth certificate of Destiny, her lost daughter. Keisha held the document tenderly. Destiny would be 9 now, the same age as Ethan, Noah, and Mason. "My baby," she whispered, "your life wasn't in vain. Every child I help is a way for you to keep living." Jessica walked into the office just then and saw Keisha holding the certificate. "Are you okay?" Keisha showed her the document. "It's Destiny's. I was thinking about her." Jessica came closer and sat beside Keisha. "You know what I think?" "What?" "That she led you to us. That somehow she knew you needed us and we needed you." "You think so?" "I'm sure of it. And you know what else? She must be so proud seeing how many children you've saved in her name." That night, Keisha decided to do something she'd never done since joining the Thompson family. She told the triplets the whole story of Destiny. They were all gathered in the living room after dinner. Ethan, Noah, and Mason, now 7 years old, listened intently as Keisha spoke about her lost daughter. "She was tiny, just like you were when you were born, and she cried so much. I tried everything to help her, but back then I didn't know what you taught me." "What did we teach you?" asked Mason. "That sometimes children know what they need better than adults do. That we should listen with our hearts, not just our heads." Noah, always emotional, began to cry. "Aunt Keisha, I'm so sorry Destiny is gone." "Me too," said Ethan. "But you know what?" said Mason, hugging Keisha. "Now you have 3 children of the heart." Keisha felt tears streaming down her face. "It's true. You are my children of the heart, and Destiny is my daughter from heaven. And we're all family," said Jessica, joining the group hug. "A family that started with many tears and turned into so much love," added Michael. Ashley, now in her final year of medical school, also joined the hug. A family not chosen by skin color, social class, or blood relation. A family chosen by love. That night, Keisha woke to a strange noise. Worried, she left her room to check what it was. In the living room, she found the triplets kneeling on the rug, looking upward. "What are you doing awake?" "We're talking to Destiny," Ethan said naturally. "Talking?" "Yes," said Noah. "We told her we take good care of you, and that you take care of so many babies now. And we asked her not to be sad," Mason added, "because you're really happy with us." Keisha knelt beside the 3 boys. "Do you think she can hear us?" "Of course," said Ethan. "Everyone we love can hear us when we speak from the heart." Keisha looked up at the ceiling, imagining her lost daughter. "Hi, Destiny. Mom is here with your 3 brothers of the heart. They're wonderful, and I know you would love them so much." "And we'd love her too," said Noah. "Can she be our sister from heaven?" Mason asked. "She can," Keisha said, moved. "She can be your sister, just as you are my children of the heart." They sat in silence for a few minutes, each saying their own quiet prayers. "Aunt Keisha," Ethan finally said, "can we tell the class about Destiny?" "Tell them what?" "That sometimes the people we love leave, but they still watch over us from another place, and that when we help others, it's like keeping the ones who left alive." Keisha was struck by the depth of a 7-year-old's reflection. "Of course you can. That's a beautiful lesson." The next day, the triplets came home from school excited. "Aunt Keisha, Aunt Keisha!" they shouted, running to her. "What happened?" "Our teacher said Destiny's story was the most beautiful she's ever heard." "And guess what?" Noah added. "Emma said her baby sister was born last week and cries a lot. We told her to come see you." "And Dylan said his aunt is pregnant with twins and is scared. We gave him the clinic's number." Keisha laughed, seeing how her special consultants were spontaneously promoting her work. "You're my best ambassadors," she said, hugging all three. 2 weeks later, Keisha got the call she'd been waiting for. "Dr. Keisha, this is Jennifer Dillon's aunt. He said you could help me with my twins." "Of course. Let's schedule an appointment." And so, the circle of love and care kept expanding, one family at a time. 6 months later, Keisha was giving a lecture in New York about the Keisha method, which had become a global standard in multiple birth care. What started as housekeeping in a Beverly Hills mansion, she told the international audience, became a worldwide revolution in how we care for multiples. After the lecture, an American doctor approached her. "Dr. Keisha, I'd like to implement your method in New York hospitals. How can we do it?" "Start small," Keisha replied. "One family at a time, one baby at a time. Love isn't in a hurry, but it never stops growing." When she returned to the United States, Keisha found a surprise waiting for her at the airport. The Triplets had made a huge banner that read, "Welcome back, our dear Aunt Keisha." "Did you miss me?" she asked, hugging all three. "So much," they replied in unison. "But we took care of the center for you," Ethan said proudly. "What do you mean?" "We helped 3 families while you were away," Noah explained. "We talked to 6 babies, and they all stopped crying," Mason added. Keisha looked at Jessica for an explanation. "It's true," Jessica confirmed, smiling. "They asked to visit the center every day. Dr. Richard let them talk to the newborns, and it really worked." "Looks like I have 3 successors in training," Keisha said proudly. "We're going to work with you forever," Ethan declared. "To help all the babies in the world," Noah added, "and make every family as happy as ours," Mason finished. End of story. Now, tell me what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your heartfelt words in the comments. Do you think Keisha made the right decisions? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories like this one.